So let's get started. I guess all of you have some interest in chlorophyll fluorescence, maybe mainly, but maybe also fluorescence in general. So today I will try to show you a little bit about how to get started on fluorescence, and then we can work on some leaves that I was out picking earlier this afternoon and see if we can do these things in practice. So before I go on the practical part, I will just share a small presentation that I have. I can also share the PDF with you afterwards. So see here. So I'll share the presentation now, and hopefully you can see that. So this is me, and yeah, shout out if something doesn't appear on your screen. But here you have the standard way of presenting the Videometer Lab as it works. You see that you have an integrating sphere with LEDs inside. They strobe different wavelengths of light, and the camera is looking through the sphere down on your sample that you place here in the lower opening. And then the sphere will be super wide inside and make sure that all the light is bouncing back and forth many times before it actually hits the sample. So the illumination will be completely diffused and it will be completely homogeneous. There may be a slight lower homogeneity in the UV because the reflectance is not as high as it is in the visual and in the near infrared. It drops a little bit, and then the number of bounces in the sphere is slightly less. But for most purposes, it will be quite enough. And definitely for fluorescence, we are not so dependent on the exact properties of the illumination geometry. So in the case of fluorescence, then we have a filter changer on top of the system here just before the camera. So we send down light by the LED still, but then we remove some of the light before it enters into the camera. And that filter changer can or has 5 positions. So you have position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the first position, position 1, is always an empty slot. That means it means that we do not filter the light, but the other 4 positions can be used as a way to measure fluorescence. So in principle, if we have 19 different wavelengths of light and 4 different filters, then we can have you can have 19 times 5 images. That means 95 different bands. 19 of those being reflectance and the rest being fluorescence. Not all of these bands are relevant, and I'll get back into that, which ones are relevant and how we can focus on different types of fluorescence using this filter changer. So since most of you are already acquainted with the reflectance mode, then I will focus on the fluorescence part. And fluorescence, you may know, is that this is how it's expressed. We send down some light and it hits the surface of your sample, and instead of being reflected, it will actually excite an electron in the substrate, and then that excited electron will at some point jump back. It's already occurring after some nanoseconds, so it's quite fast. It will jump back to the original state and send out another photon, which has lower energy than the one that was used for exciting the electron. So the difference is sort of used to heat up the sample slightly, but what's interesting is that we get a photon back which has lower energy, and that means higher wavelengths than the one exciting. So the one that hits the sample is the excitation light, and the light that leaves as fluorescence is called the emitted light. And we have something called the Stokes shift, which is the difference in wavelengths between the emitted and the excitation light. And if you see the graph over here, you have the excitation light here as the blue curve, and then you have the emitted light as the red curve. And the difference between the two peaks is called the Stokes shift, and that is typically positive. In some situations, it can be negative, but we will not really dig into that. But it is actually positive to have a negative Stokes shift. We will work on different distributions here, but mainly focus on chlorophyll, because that is one of the main fluorophores in plants and seeds, and chlorophyll has a very prominent fluorescence and something that can be used to create a lot of information about seeds and plants and photosynthetic activity in the plants. And we will try to use that to get more information than we can by reflectance. So I have a small recommendation here. If you want to really know more detailed about fluorescence, then this video by Åsmund Rinnan, he's from University of Copenhagen, and he explains very well practical fluorescence in 1 hour. So you learn sort of about the principles of fluorescence from a food analysis point of view, including also, of course, agricultural products, but not so much plants as such, but more general food applications. Very well, or highly recommended to see this. The link is in the presentation, and I will send you that after the presentation here, or the webinar. So this is the way we typically take our images in the Vitometer lab. We have wavelengths from UV up to near infrared, and we take a number of different bands and make a stack of images, all being reflectance images throughout the wavelength range. And when we do fluorescence, it's actually done in a similar way. We are still strobing a number of bands, and then we apply this filter. In this case, I have drawn what is called a 500 nanometer long pass filter. So the curve is sort of sketched out here. It will suppress anything below 500, and it will transmit anything above 500. And for these Razer filters that we have in the Vitometer lab, it's quite a strong suppression. It's called OD4. That means that the cut band, which is this part below 500, that is suppressed with a factor of 10,000. So four orders of magnitude suppression. And the pass band is close to 100% transmission, not completely 100%, but quite close to that. So we look at the excitation first. So we choose some bands in order to excite fluorescence. In this case, all of the bands for excitation has to be in the cut band, because if the light that we send down is not in the cut band of the filter, then you will just see the same as in reflectance mode. So there's no need to use the filter. So Only bands in the cut range are used for excitation, and in the emission bands, we measure anything that is above the 500 nanometers, so what is in the pass band of the filter. We will not see the individual bands, but we will see the sum of all of these. So if we want to separate the emission bands, then we need to use a band pass filter instead of a long pass filter. But the long pass filter will give you the sum of the pass band responses. It's also shown here that we have, if we have in this case a long pass filter of 600, then in principle we could use the LEDs below 600 as excitation. No need to use the ones in the pass band, so above 600. But also be aware that if you have a wavelength like 590, then because the LED light is, let's say, around 15, 20 nanometers full width, half maximum for this peak, then part of the peak will actually enter into the pass band. So that will give you false light from actually reflectance and not from fluorescence. So typically I will avoid wavelengths that are too close to the separating wavelengths here. So I will not use 590 if I have a 600 long pass filter. So what can it be used for? It can be used for many different types of what we call intrinsic fluorescence. So that is where the food or agricultural product fluoresce by their own nature and chemistry. So that is also sometimes called autofluorescence typically when it's not needed, but often it's actually quite a nice way to analyze samples, and especially for things like the chlorophylls or other porphyrin compounds. Chlorophyll A and B have a very specific fluorescence within the visible range. If you are into skin analysis, then collagen and melanin and what we call ages. So these are relevant for skin health. And in that case, you can also use fluorescence for those type of images. If you want to, if you're interested in protein chemistry or amino acids, then you can look at tryptophan or tyrosine fluorescence to see the abundance of these aromatic amino acids. And in this case, we cannot measure the reflectance because the reflectance or the absorption is quite low. It's around 280, but the emission is actually within the range visible by the Videometer Lab camera. So you can see the fluorescence, the UV fluorescence. Okay, there's a small NADH or NADPH, FAD. So some of the typical molecules in living cells, as well as ATP and DNA and other nucleic acids, they have different fluorescence properties within our range. If you want to do, let's say, DNA fluorescence, then you need to go down to around 265 nanometers. But then we have some experience here that we can see nicely spots of DNA, which is otherwise not visible by the spectrum used by Videometer Lab. Some vitamins are also fluorescing in our range, and that is these vitamins. Also plant metabolites, typically flavonoids or other phenolics are typically aromatic compounds which have fluorescence. Another group which is interesting is microbial metabolites like mycotoxins, aflatoxin, T2, HT2, and so on. They also have some fluorescence properties that makes it possible to directly estimate concentrations in the surface. So we also have different types of built-in markers that could be, in the broad sense, banknotes and paper and stuff for anti-counterfeiting products. And it could also be coatings on seeds that contain markers so that you can see whether these coated seeds are indeed genuine. It's a very nice feature to use because it doesn't mean that we should add chemicals, but of course we could add chemicals to mark different compounds in your sample with fluorescent labeling or fluorogenic reagents, so enzymes that will create a chromogenic or fluorogenic effect. So, but right now we will not look so much into that, but that is definitely possible. We will today focus on the more non-destructive applications. So, in the filter emission changer, or in the emission filter changer, we have the 5 apertures where we typically use the 4 for different long pass filters, and the basic configuration is a 400, 500, 600, and 700 long pass filters. And of these 4 filters, then the 700 is quite interesting because that will take most of the top from chlorophyll fluorescence, no matter which excitation wavelengths you have, because there are multiple wavelengths that will give fluorescence as excitation wavelengths, but most of the fluorescence will come above 700. To fit in our filter changer, the filters must be 25 millimeter diameter and up to 3 millimeter thickness. And then you can actually go ahead and look at some of these providers of filters, and you can actually change the filters if you need to have specific wavelength response. So fluorescence imaging is about chemistry, and chemistry is about sort of which compound is interesting and shows which fluorescence, and that means it's much more hardware dependent than the reflectance mode. So you need to consider whether you need a different filter in your filter changer if you go for a specific type of chemistry. So we have the standard set of filters here, but we can also supply with 450, 550, 650, and 700. And we can, of course, also do other configurations. Let's have a small example here where we have 2 seed lots, one which I think has been primed and one which is unprimed. The unprimed has low chlorophyll and the primed one has high chlorophyll, and it's not directly visible on the RGB image. But if we take the fluorescence channel, in this case excitation in the red range, so what we can call red excitation fluorescence of chlorophyll, then we see this image, and you see that we have a low response on the left and a high response on part of the seed or the embryo of the seed on the right side. So this means that it's quite easy to see the difference between those 2 samples and measure maybe the effect of priming or the seed maturity in general. You can also measure on leaves and so on. Sometimes it's also a question of sample preparation when you want to measure on living plants. If you can pick the leaf and put it under the Vidimeter lab, then that is, of course, a way to go. But people do different things. So some of our customers have like a plastic plate like this, where you have two straps, and you can sort of align leaves and measure them like that, or you can put them if you have practical problems in doing that, you could probably also place them in different ways under the Videometer Lab. In case you want a more flexible solution, then it is possible to remove completely the part of the base plate and make your own fixture for plants, or you can even have some customers will have a robotic, or you can say a articulating arm, so that you can place it in any position that you find useful. So we have a system that we typically use for skin measurements, but it can also be used for plants. So the arm can be placed in any position in relation to the sample. Just some interesting examples here. We have examples of mildew on barley, and you can see that we can look at the mildew directly. So we look at the organism so the pathogen itself, and that is shown on the lower left. But we can also look at different channels of fluorescence, and here we see the fluorescence with ultra blue light, and you see that in this case, if you have a large number of pathogens, then they can either shield off the fluorescence from the leaves, but also you can sometimes see the difference between different areas of green tissue. Now, this is a little bit difficult because it's quite heavily infected, but I guess we can see here we have the red fluorescence, and you see that there is a typically you will have a high fluorescence in areas which are stressed, and with this level of infection, then most of the mesophilic areas are indeed stressed, so they will actually become bright and show a lot of fluorescence. The dark areas will consist of two different types. Either it's dark because of necrosis, so when the chlorophyll completely depletes, then it will be dark. But also if you're actually looking at the pathogen itself, or if the leaf is very fresh and with high photosynthetic activity, it will also be dark. Here we have maybe an example here. So here we can see that in this barley leaf, where you have complete necrosis, you have a black color. Where you have, let's say here, you have differences between. You have some areas which are darker here around the middle and also down at the bottom of this one. And you will see that if you get closer, it looks quite instructive here, because you have a darker area here, and then when you move towards the infection, then you get something which is very bright. So this is highly stressed but active mesophilic areas, and then you suddenly jump into a dark area, which is necrosis, where the chlorophyll has been completely depleted, and there's no photosynthetic activity. So that's probably a good way to illustrate the different ways of chlorophyll fluorescence expression. So the brightest area are actually the stressed but chlorophyll-containing mesophilic areas. We can also look at grains or inside of grains. We can look at, in this case, a barley kernel, where it's difficult to see from the outside, but if you part it and you look at fluorescence, then you can see active areas here in the barley kernel. And sometimes that's a good way to sort of show the development of the kernel, for instance, for, again, priming or malting or other things. Here we have a Acrospire measurement where we do measure inside the barley kernel without splitting it, and we can get a much higher contrast for the Acrospire. That was the first presentation, and now I would like to just maybe illustrate the other resource that I can offer for this. That's the document about chlorophyll fluorescence, which will recap some of the stuff that I have told here, but also add a little bit to that and add also links that are useful for you. All right, so if I go now to my Video Meter Lab software, and first of all, I will recommend to install the newest version if you have the possibility to do that, 3.22.20, because there are quite a number of good updates for you if you want to follow the development, and if you want to know exactly which updates, you can look at the changelog here. So you can see a lot of things are happening. We have a very active development right now. Let's have a look at where we are selecting the filter changer. So you can basically run your instrument in two modes, with and without filter changer. And of course, it takes that you have a filter changer installed, and I think all of you have. So you can take on and off the filter changer here. If you take it on, as I have, then you will see that when you go to light setup, oops, maybe I have no, I will just close and initialize again. I don't know if you can hear it homing, but when you initialize, it will home the filter changer, and typically that makes a slight sound. And now it's initialized, and I should be able to go here to the light setup. And you see now I have 5 light setup instead of just having one. Filter 1, you can see here, it is being used. It's of the type no filter, so filter position 1 is always just reflectance. And I don't see any need for changing that. It's always useful to get the reflectance images. So filter 2, you have the 400 long pass, filter 3, the 500, filter 6, this 600, and filter 5, the 700 long pass. So the way I have set it up now is with, I can just see here if I load. I don't have it here. I have made one which is called Fresh Norway Maple Leaf, because I just took that leaf half an hour ago, and I also have for different seed types. So I will just open that. Or maybe it's because it has already set it up. Fresh Norway Maple light setup. So if I go to filter 2, you can see that when I have a long pass 400, it only makes sense to use the wavelengths below 400. So that's only the 365. If I choose filter 3, then it actually says I also use that. And that's the 500. And I apply all the different wavelengths below 500. So this will make it possible to measure chlorophyll fluorescence with blue excitation. And if I choose filter number 4, you see I don't use that. So for chlorophyll, I have no need for the 600. And I do need the 700 one because I want to go for the red excitation, chlorophyll fluorescence. And these are the 3 wavelengths typically used for that. So they are quite important because that's a very prominent fluorescence. So you can try that, shine on leaves with your red laser, and you will see some fluorescence on the leaves. And in this case, 660 is mainly chlorophyll B fluorescence. No, chlorophyll A fluorescence. 630 is primarily chlorophyll B fluorescence, and 645 will be a mixture of both of these. So, but I typically like to see all 3 of them if I am in the exploratory mode, and that I am right now. So I don't really need to do anything here. I will just let you know that the strobe times are also different. So in fluorescence, in reflectance mode, I have a very low strobe time of 39 microseconds. So that's because we have a lot of light in reflectance mode because there's no filter. So I choose a very short strobe time, which is typically enough for all of them. You see, I don't even use all the time to acquire that. But again, you should probably not go lower than at least 35,000 microseconds because the maximum frame rate is 30 frames per second. And that means we cannot go too much lower than 35,000. But 39,000 is fine. And if I go to filter number 2, I have chosen quite a lot more, 220,000 microseconds or 220 milliseconds. And here on filter 3, I have chosen 450, so almost half a second. And on filter number 5, I have 0.8 seconds. Why have I chosen those? So those are my experience for chlorophyll fluorescence. It means that, let's say if we go back to filter 1, you can see here we have universal strobe times of 100. So a universal strobe time of 100 means enough light to just about bring a super wide plate into saturation of the camera. So this corresponds to this pressing this button, 100% reflectance. So this is the ideal light setup if you have a super wide plate. The good thing about that is that if you take another sample, then it will not run into saturation. So unless you want to optimize the light setup further for a very specific black target, then you can put in the black target and do auto light. But otherwise, I will just for now keep it at 100. When I then go to filter number 2 and say, I now have a universal strobe time of 5,000, it actually means that I send down 50 times more light. And that's because fluorescence is typically, the yield is much lower, so between 1 and 10% of reflectance for a very strong fluorophore and lower for a weak fluorophore. So here I magnify it with 50 times compared to reflectance mode. and that should be enough for UV fluorescence, because that's typically quite strong. And here, when I go to filter 3, you can see that I have now increased the universal strobe time to 100 times the 100% reflectance. So now I'm operating down at a fluorescence yield of 1% of the reflectance, and that should be fairly good for these planes. And for filter number 5, I'm even down to 200 times. So I'm operating at a yield of 0.5% of a super wide reflectance. So it's just to give you an idea about the dynamics here. And now I have done this based on some experimentation originally. I can share these light setups, but you are more than welcome to play around, and I can also give you some tips on that. But typically it's about trying and see if you get into saturation, then you lower it a little bit, or if you get a very dark image, then you increase it. And then you can, of course, step by step, make your way to a proper light setup. But I will take that now, and I will go back into my normal mode here, because that's basically the only thing. You activate filter changer, and then you set the light setup or load the light setup, and then you're ready to go. You can do F12, and it will now go down on my leaf. And it will first do reflectance images, and then it will change to filter position 2 and take that, filter position 3, and then finally filter position 5. It will put all of these together in one stack of images. So let's have a look at that. So it will show again the leaf in standardized RGB. So that should look as the leaf look in outdoor noon daylight. And you can see if I go to view mode grayscale, then you can see behind that leaf there are actually 27 bands. If I right click and look at properties, you can see that of the 27 bands, you have the first 19 are filter position 1, which is the reflectance bands with no filter. And then you have one band with filter 2 with 400 long pass. And then you have 3 bands with filter 3. And then finally you have 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 bands with filter 3 and 3 bands with filter 5. So altogether, 27 bands, which are, I think, useful for us. And if you want to look for more fluorescence, like let's say metabolites from microbiology, you can certainly add those. I'm not expecting any of those here, so I will not get into the other types of fluorescence channels. So how do I deal with this? I can go back here and look at my sRGB image because it looks nice. And first of all, I would like to make sure I don't deal with the background. So I go up to the mask and say I remove the blue background. Then I only have the leaf area. I can go into looking at the individual bands. So again, I go back to grayscale, and you see it becomes almost black. I have 2 tricks to enhance the contrast. First of all, you right click and say you choose the foreground mask for auto scale. So it will not scale according to the background. So that helped a little bit. But it's now scaling between minimum and maximum. And if you have one bright pixel somewhere, then it may look too dark. So the way to make it even more contrast rich is that you use scale, and you can choose 6 sigma scaling instead of minimum maximum scaling. If I choose that, I can see my leaf here, and you see that you have a lot of different expressions here on the leaf. And yeah, I should probably tell you that I did a little bit to the leaf just to enhance the demo effect. If I go back, you can see a little bit that I heated up part of the leaf over here. I don't know if you can, I hope you can see my cursor. Here on the right side of the leaf, you can see that it's slightly light green, and that's probably because I was a bit too rough. If you want to kill the photosynthesis of the leaf, you can heat it up to just 60 degrees, and then it will not change color too much. And but you will still be able to see the effect by chlorophyll fluorescence. So let me just go back to the grayscale here. And if I now go Control minus, I will jump to band 27 out of 27. You can see here, how does the leaf look in red excitation and emission above 700. So you can see the leaf here with all the ribs and mesophilic areas, and you can see some dark spots which have no fluorescence. But you also see that the areas close to the ribs are typically high in chlorophyll fluorescence, and that means low in photosynthetic activity. But you can also see where I was a little bit crude on the leaf here with the heated water. You can see that it is highly stressed and has a lot of chlorophyll fluorescence, and you can even see the boundary quite clearly what happened there. And I'm not sure what these areas are, but definitely you can look into these spots as kind of at least they are spots with some specific chlorophyll fluorescence. And if you want to quantify the current biotic or abiotic stress of the plant, then you could somehow quantify the overall fluorescence of the leaf, but you could also exclude ribs or other parts of the leaf from that calculation, so that you only measure the fluorescence level of the mesophilic areas, because this will be the response that is most has the highest signal to noise ratio in relation to stress of the plants. So I guess that was my main message here.